All right, ladies and gentlemen, so what we're doing here now is going through the QAT's practice exam, which I would like you to complete tonight. So the QAT practice exam looks like this. I sent you a copy of that tonight. I'm going to go through each question with you and give you a starting point for each question. So it's a bit of a free kick. It's a bit easier than it otherwise would be, but I want you to sort of start there. These are the sorts of thoughts I'd be having in my 5 minutes of reading time as I went through and looked at each thing. So this is a way that you could write your response, or maybe a couple of ways that you could write your response. So watch this the whole way through. Then I want you to have a crack at the exam tonight. Tomorrow, I'd like you to have a look to time at the trial exam that I sent through today, and we'll go through that question by question at the study night tomorrow night. So the QAT's practice exam, question 1, describe one short-term cause of your selected global issue. There are many. The two I've written are militarism and armed conflict. Question 2, outline the response of one global actor to one cause of your global issue. So the global actor is the United States. The response is that they've invested in their arsenal. The second one you could use is the United States Security Council, who have imposed sanctions on North Korea for their testing. So the next question is assess the ability of one institution of global governance to respond effectively to your selected global issue. As little Maxie gets a bit upset over there, I've said the IAEA, they've improved transparency, but states can deny entry. And you could talk about Iran and Iraq. The next question. Explain one short-term cause of your selected contemporary crisis. You could talk about alliances, and you could also talk about Russian cultural heritage. Question 5 is outline the political interest of one non-state actor in your selected contemporary crisis. In this sense, I would talk about Amnesty or another NGO like that, and talk about how they're upholding human rights and trying to protect civilians. Question 6, analyse the impact of one state's interests on its ability to respond effectively to your selected crisis. I've spoken about Russia. They invaded to ensure their security from the West, but in doing so, they isolated themselves. So they're not able to respond effectively because they are very isolated. They have sanctions on them, and they're unable to do very much at the moment. Question 7 is outline one diplomatic process used to attempt your selected contemporary crisis. 2 that you could use are the Macron Peace Conference and also the China 12 points. If we go to question 8, describe one example of cultural power used by your selected Indo-Pacific state. You could use Confucius Institutes or Panda diplomacy. For question 9, explain one example of your selected Indo-Pacific state using diplomacy as a foreign policy instrument. You could talk about the Solomon Islands and the deal that the Chinese did with the Solomon Islands to bolster their security in return for, among other things, recognition that Taiwan is a part of China. Question 10 is evaluate the effectiveness of your selected Indo-Pacific state in pursuing its national interest of regional standing. Now, it's an 8-marker. As mentioned, there are no 8 markers in the mock exam that was sent to us by VCAR, and I've been told that our exam will look very similar, so I'm not sure you'll get an 8 marker, but you might, which would just require a little bit more detail. But 2 things that you could talk about in this question are the South China Sea, which paint China as being very strong but unpredictable, which affects their regional standing. You could also talk about the Belt and Road Initiative, in which their reliance on China from other countries goes up, but debt trap diplomacy makes them a potentially unreliable partner. When we move into the source analysis, I'll let you read those. There's a source there by Prime Minister Albanese. There's a source by the Global Times, which is one of China's state newspapers, and there's also an Australian foreign policy white paper. The first 2 questions I'm going to let you do on your own, or question 1A and B, I'll let you do on your own. Question C, using source C in your own knowledge, explain Australia's use of one foreign policy instrument to achieve one national interest. You could talk about diplomatic visits to China in order to assist in getting a trade relationship back off the table recently. So recent visits to shore up trade. For question 2, using at least 2 of the sources in your own knowledge, analyse 2 challenges to Australia's relationship with one state from the Indo-Pacific region. So we just use China again. And I would say that you can talk about trade tensions and security rivalry there quite easily. To section C, you've got your 2 10 markers. So the first one is global interconnectedness has done more to exacerbate than resolve global issues and or crises. it's not an and or. You need to talk about both. So evaluate this statement with reference to one global issue and one contemporary crisis. So you need to talk about both. Don't let that quote throw you. I would say as an overall contention that covers both parts, you can talk about how it allows cooperation and exacerbates spread. So global interconnectedness allows people to cooperate at places like forums like the United Nations. And it also exacerbates spread. If we look at, we can trade much more easily, and and we're much more interconnected through alliances and things. So if we look specifically, weapons of mass destruction, there are treaties that have allowed people to, that have brought about a reduction in proliferation, let's say. But there's also been a spread of technology which has caused that issue to continue. And if we look at Ukraine, as far as cooperation goes, there's plenty of diplomacy taking place in the United Nations. There's plenty of condemnation of many states coming together to condemn Russia and condemn the invasion. And we've even got ICC rulings and things like that that you could talk about. But as far as exacerbating spread, because of increased interdependence and global rivalries, the conflict is being adversely affected by global interconnectedness. So you can see where you need to make a judgment there. It's an evaluation. I'll leave that up to you, but you can use that sort of evidence to go through that evaluation. The final question is, with reference to Australia and one Indo-Pacific state you studied this year, compare the extent to which each Indo-Pacific state's actions have contributed to political stability and or change in the Indo-Pacific region. Now, I don't believe you'll get a compare question, but we may as well be prepared. And I don't think it's a very tricky command term to anyway, so we'll run it as a compare question. I've tackled this as purely stability. So it's the extent to which each Indo-Pacific state's actions have contributed to stability. So I think you can again say that they've had a mixed impact, a positive and a negative. Australia, both countries have used aid to have positive impacts. So Australia through the Pacific Step Up and China through mask diplomacy. Both of those things have brought about stability. And then if we look at change, you could talk about military posturing causing instability. Rather than change, instability. So you could talk about Australia signing AUKUS, that annoyed China. You could talk about Australia dealing in the Quad, that annoyed China. And you could also talk about how China have, the things China have been doing in the South China Sea have been frustrating Australia. So there you have it. Use that. That's 8 minutes. You should still have 6.5 left for your reading time. But that's a little starting point for you in this. I want to see you get through this either tonight or tomorrow. And then, as I said, do the other one to time and bring that along to the study night. Awesome. Keep it up. You're doing great. Bye.